We have waited 2 years for Netflix's The Haunting of Hill House follow-up, but is The Haunting of Bly Manor actually worth the wait? Here's my spoiler-free review of The Haunting Season 2. The Haunting of Bly Manor follows Danny Clayton, a young American running from personal tragedy who takes an au pair job in 1987 at a remote British estate taking care of 2 very unusual orphans, Miles and Flora. In addition to Victoria Pedretti, who plays Danny, Bly Manor also stars a lot of other Hill House favorites, including Oliver Jackson-Cohen as the toxic Peter Quint, Henry Thomas as Miles and Flora's absentee uncle, Henry Wingrave, and Kate Siegel and Katie Parker in secret roles. But of all the returning players, it's really Oliver who proves to be the standout of this season as Peter, who poisons everything he touches in a magnetic performance by Oliver that is so far from the vulnerable Luke Crane in Hill House. I do feel like I should warn you though that they also do a lot of accents this season, and not everyone really lives up to the task, so just brace yourself for a lot of voices. In addition to these returning actors, the Bly Manor cast also includes Rahul Kohli as the lovably corny cook Owen, Amelia Eve as the swaggering groundskeeper Jamie, Tahirah Sharif as the kind-hearted former au pair Rebecca Jessel, and Tania Miller as the dedicated housekeeper and fashion icon Hannah Gross. Just wait until you see her turtlenecks. A legend. The Haunting of Bly Manor draws its premise straight from Henry James's gothic horror The Turn of the Screw, which follows a governess fixated on saving 2 children's souls from a pair of sinister ghosts. But the show soon goes in unexpected directions as creator Mike Flanagan also draws inspiration from other Henry James stories like The Jolly Corner, The Romance of Certain Old Clothes, and The Great Good Place, which they say 6 times in the first episode. I can't say exactly how all of these stories come into play in Bly Manor without spoiling too much, but I can say if you're expecting the season to be like Hill House or even The Turn of the Screw, you need to adjust your expectations. This season can't match the visceral, haunting imagery of Hill House or even the psychological suspense of The Turn of the Screw. And while atmospheric, Bly Manor delivers few piercing scares. What this season does really well, though, is build up a sense of dread. This may not be what many expect going into Bly Manor, but Mike Flanagan builds a beautifully moody story about love and heartbreak where the ghosts are as much embodiments of romance as they are obstacles to it. As Stephen Crane said in Hill House, a ghost is a wish. And this remains true in Bly Manor, but all the wishes are driven by the same thing: love and longing. Society often expects people to get over or move on from a painful loss, whether that be a death or a breakup, but the characters in Bly Manor embrace and cling to these absences. And each of the show's central romances examines a different way this desire manifests. For some, it can be beautiful and romantic, and for others, this is a horror story, so things can take some turns. Throughout it all is a core cast of women navigating a world that isn't designed to recognize their talents. But rather than bend to the world, these women find ways to remake reality to fit their vision of what the world should be. It's empowering as hell, and it's awesome to see a horror show that doesn't just have a few great female characters, but is built around women defining their own identity and facing some of the darkest things life and the afterlife has to offer. Like in Hill House, Bly Manor uses paranormal situations to force their characters to face their fears, their past, and all the choices they made that got them to this point. And one thing the show does really well is take the pains to understand the hurt that causes someone to keep harmful cycles alive, as much as it does the hope that inspires someone to find a better way forward. In this show, no one, not even the most villainous characters, are purely evil, even though they do some really evil up shit. Bly Manor is really ambitious with the themes it tackles and the way it approaches them, but this show would have been served so much better with a tighter focus. In Hill House, the Cranes were all coping with a shared source of trauma, but in Bly Manor, each character is given their own personal struggle. And unfortunately, Bly Manor really struggles to juggle all these various arcs in effective and efficient ways. As a result, the character development just never gets as deep as it did in Hill House, and the first half of the season has serious problems with pacing. But for those who do continue on, their patience will be rewarded in the back half of the season. So if you have the time, trust me, there is payoff at the end of the season. Just wait it out. We can all then complain afterwards about how slow those first few episodes are, but then at the end, we can all talk about how great the ending is. Despite some issues, there are enough touching moments and eerie turns in Bly Manor that remind you just how good Flanagan is when he's at his best, and many of these center around Tania Miller's Hannah Gross. No one brings as much humanity to the series as Tania, who plays a self-determined woman who goes to great lengths to shield herself from the pains of life, but in the process also shields herself from so much more. Although Danny is undeniably the show's heroine, it's Hannah's journey who lingers long after the season ends. So if you're able to watch the show and not be haunted by Hannah Gross, you definitely watched it wrong. The Haunting of Bly Manor is an entertaining and evocative follow-up to Hill House, despite never reaching the heights of its predecessor. And ultimately, the biggest obstacle this show faces is the incredibly high expectations most viewers are gonna have for it. Ones that could easily turn into disappointment, but not because the season isn't compelling, just because it is so different from the first. It has a lot of really interesting things to say, but the execution just is not always there, and it definitely could be a lot scarier. So as much as I wanted The Haunting of Bly Manor to be another perfect season, I gotta give it 3.5 out of 5. 5 what? I don't know, 5 spooks. We leave it open. I just like saying spooks. Bly Manor is a love story above all else, and if viewers could just shed their preconceptions and allow Bly to be what it is, they'll find a lot of value. So if you like heartbreaking romances, moody ghost stories, great performances, and amazing 80s fashion, it is still well worth your time. And for more on The Haunting, check out our What the F**k explainers for Bly Manor and Hill House.